Alright, so now that we've made it this far, we will then look at gametogenesis, which is the generation of gametes, layman's term sex cells, right? Which is basically the guys that have 23 chromosomes, which are, of course, we know from meiosis, are haploid. Okay, so under gametogenesis, we've got spermatogenesis and oogenesis. They are both gametogenesis. So spermatogenesis in males happens in the testicles, and then oogenesis in females happens in the ovaries. Now, oogenesis is actually easier. Spermatogenesis is the one that's going to be slightly more complicated, but we'll walk through it. So, quick background. Gametogenesis is a process whereby the body creates or manufactures new gametes. Okay, it is a meiotic process. In other words, it's a halving process. Hence, we mentioned that it will change 46 chromosomes to 23 chromosomes. It's a halving process. In males, gametogenesis takes place in the testicles, aka the balls. Now, of course, it's not a biological term. Okay, so it is right to say the testicles within the structure that is called the seminiferous tubules. We will look at that structure when we look at spermatogenesis. In females, gametogenesis takes place in the ovaries, and this was previously also covered in the menstrual cycle. So we'll start off with the comparison between the two. Spermatogenesis takes place in males. The meiosis occurs continuously. Okay, so it happens every time. Okay, hence I've mentioned that these millions of sperm cells they are created all the time. Okay, so hence we generate millions of sperm cells in the end. Okay, and this is completed in days or weeks, so it happens all the time basically. Okay, meiosis and differentiation process takes place continuously. Now this we'll look at when we look at genetics in detail. Okay, in detail. Okay, when we look at genetics and inheritance. But it's okay to keep this this in mind. It involves metamorphosis of sperm cells. Okay, this is the part where I mentioned in the testicles, when we're done generating these spermatids, they are not going to mature yet. They're going to mature in the epididymis. Hence the mention the process of metamorphosis when they change into sperm cells from spermatids. All right. We produce small and motile spermatozoa. Remember, this happens in the epididymis. Okay. 4 gametes are produced from each meiotic division. Now, this we know from meiosis. It occurs continuously from puberty. Okay. It occurs from until we die, basically. So even if you are 100 years old, you are still producing sperm cells, unlike females, which only happens until menopause. Okay, it takes 70 days for mature sperm cells to be produced in males. Okay, mature sperm cells, not spermatids, but mature sperm cells. Okay, so this is when we're counting the entire time from the period where we're in the testicles up to the period where we are in the epididymis. Okay, now when we look at oogenesis, this takes place in females, we know. It's also a meiotic process. Okay, it's also a meiotic process, 2 divisions as well. The completion of this takes place, it takes months. Okay, unlike males, which takes weeks. So we're real fast with this. As for females, it takes months. Okay, now the differentiation of these gametes, there is no metamorphosis, unfortunately. Okay, so the reason is because only one ovum is secreted. Okay, unlike males, we've got millions, so there's always a difference between each one of them. As for females, there's only one genetic variation within only that ovum. Okay, as for us, every one of those million sperm cells is genetically different, unlike females who only secrete one. So there's only one genetic material to only focus on. All right. They produce large, non-motile, okay, ova. We're just talking about one ovum, okay. It has basically everything. Its own cytoplasm, food, and everything. Unlike the sperm cells, which will actually require the food and everything from the semen, as for these ones, it basically has its own food and everything. All right. Only one gamete is produced. Okay. Remember this. They produce four. Okay. These will dissipate, and only one will be released. All right. This continues from puberty up until menopause. Menopause is that period where they will no longer be producing these ovums, okay. And then this occurs monthly, okay, once a month. If we remember, I've mentioned earlier that ovulation takes place once a month. All right. Now we can look at oogenesis. Yes, women are complicated. Okay, so this is a diagram showing this whole situation. Okay, so to begin this process, we're going to start off with the hormones. Okay, remember they've got 4 hormones. FSH, this is the first hormone that we're going to look at. LH, okay, and then we've got progesterone, and then we've got estrogen. Apparently that O is actually silent, but nevertheless. So to begin with, first we're going to start off with estrogen. Estrogen is going to stimulate these ovaries to start creating or rather to start manufacturing what are called follicles. Okay, so it's going to begin this follicle development. Okay, and then right at the brain of the female, there's going to be this hormone that's going to be secreted into the blood, and then this blood is going to take it to the ovaries. Okay, now this ovaries is going to cause these follicles to be stimulated, okay, into what are called Graafian follicles or Graafian follicles. Okay, they're going to be stimulated into Graafian follicles. All right. Once they are stimulated into these Graafian follicles, they'll sort of look like this. Okay, they'll have all this junk up around them. All right, this is what we have there. Okay, so that's why we have those Graafian follicles. Okay, and then what happens is our actual ovum that we require is going to be ejected. Okay, it's going to be ejected, and then what remains here is going to become what is called a corpus luteum. Okay, and the hormone that's responsible for this transformation is called in fact this will be the progesterone, because at the time that we are ejecting this ovum, the endometrium is going to become much more thicker and much more glandular to get ready for pregnancy and fertilization. Okay, so this whole situation that just happened, that's our ovulation that we have here. Okay, so then our corpus luteum is going to form out of what remains. Okay, that's where we have our luteinizing hormone. Okay, that luteinizing hormone will form that corpus luteum. Okay, and this corpus luteum will inhibit that progesterone. It will stop this from becoming more glandular and vascular. Okay, and then ovulation took place. Then this ovum will be released into the fallopian tube, and then it will be taken to the uterus by the fallopian tube with those cilia that we've mentioned earlier. That is oogenesis. That is everything in a nutshell. Now, of course, those follicles, remember, those follicles themselves have gone through that meiotic process. Okay, so they'll already be containing those 23 chromosomes that we've spoken about. All right, now we can look over at spermatogenesis. Now, of course, to look at this whole process in detail, you will have to go through the menstrual cycle, which we will look at in another separate chapter. Now, spermatogenesis. Finally, something for the guys. We've been looking at women for quite a while. So, the balls, rather, the testicles, they look something like this. This is our the epididymis. Okay, and then this is the actual testicles. So inside the testicles we've got these tubules like this, called the seminiferous tubules. Inside those seminiferous tubules we've got a number of cells that are there. Okay, so these cells that we need to look at form these spermatids. We'll actually look at those in detail when we look at this graphical representation. We'll actually see these spermatids that are now forming, going outwards right there. Okay, so these are forming from these cells. Now for you to actually understand these cells, you can go over to your textbook inside the Mind the Gap textbook. Alright, you'll be able to find these. We'll also be able to see where the spermatozoa comes into action when these spermatids go down the epididymis as they mature and earn that spermatozoa element. Alright, so the whole idea is that we've got these cells which have also undergone through their meiotic process. So they've gone through that meiosis. Okay, they've gone through meiosis, and then what happens is they're going to be taken out, and then they eventually become those spermatids as they sort of grow a tail right there. Okay, now if you go over your Mind the Gap textbook, you should be able to find these cells in detail. I think it was the cells of Leydig. Cells of Leydig are what they are called. Okay, they are called the cells of Leydig, which eventually become those spermatids, and then those spermatids will then become those. In fact, it's not cells of Leydig. Excuse me. It is not cells of Leydig that do that. Cells of Leydig is in another part of the body. Cells of Leydig, in fact, are in the ear, not the not the testicles. Those ones are actually called the Sertoli cells. The Sertoli cells. Yes, they are called the Sertoli cells that eventually become those spermatids. Now, of course, you can look over those in detail inside the Mind the Gap textbook to avoid confusion. Anyways, that is spermatogenesis. That is the end of the reproductive structures. Now, of course, afterwards we shall look at the human gestation period and the menstrual cycle.